Welcome, friends, to another episode of Planting Seeds. We are so glad that you joined us today. We at Morgan Ministries like to say that we desire to plant seeds and cultivate a generation. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, let's recap for a second as I shared a little bit in our first episode last week. Plant seeds of what? We want to plant seeds, first of all, of faith. We want to plant seeds of faith so that a generation is cultivated into men and women who courageously dive deeper into spiritual waters. We want to plant seeds also of purpose. We want to see a generation cultivated into men and women who discover the purpose-filled pieces in the story that God has for them. And then finally, we want to plant seeds of leadership. We want to see a generation cultivated and see men and women who become kingdom leaders and who begin to embrace a life of influence that adds value to those around them. And that's who we are, and that's what we're all about. So today, let's talk about a seed of faith. Now, I want you to think back with me for a second. For those of you who are followers of Christ, and you've been walking with him for a while, let's think back to when we first came to know Christ. For some of you, maybe you were younger. For me, I was 14. I was a pretty intense 14-year-old, and then I came to know Jesus, and then I probably was even more intense. And one of those things that I remember that was a description of Kelly's life then as a new believer in Christ is that I had this strong desire to want to please God. Now, you're going, that's good. Yes, the desire was right. However, in my immaturity, in my, infancy, so to speak, as a new baby in Christ, I wanted to do that in order to try to earn, or make God happy with me, almost approaching him as a beggar instead of a daughter and a child of God. Thankfully now, as I've grown older, God is teaching me about what that life looks like to please God and what he desires from us in that. Now, what does pleasing God have to do with faith? Maybe you're asking. Well, everything. We want to look today at a verse found in Hebrews chapter 11. It's Hebrews 11:6. It's actually one of Dan's favorite verses because the author of Hebrews gives us the exact definition of what life looks like as a follower of Christ and how we please God. And he says it this way. I'm actually going to read it in the Amplified. It's one of my favorite ones. And so it says this, but without faith, right? Without faith, it is impossible to, again in the Amplified, to walk with God and to please him. Without faith, it's impossible to walk with God and to please him. Wow. Without faith. So, and we know, you and I, if you want to please God, we must then live a life of faith. That is what pleases God. Not because we're trying to earn something, but because we have received, and it's because of his work that we want to please him. And we please God by living a life of faith. So today, you and I, we have to ask ourselves this question, and this is where my challenge to you comes in for this week. I want you to ask yourself this question. Where is faith being activated in my life? Am I living a life of faith? Well, in order to answer that question, I want to make sure that we understand what faith is. So let's quickly back up a few verses in Hebrews 11 and let's see what the author says there. He says that faith is the assurance, again, I'm reading in the Amplified, a confirmation of things hoped for, divinely guaranteed. So we're assuring that the things that we are hoping for, we are praying for, we are believing God for, that they are guaranteed. And the evidence of things not seen, the conviction of their reality, faith comprehends as fact what cannot be experienced by the physical senses. So you and I want to ask ourselves, are we living a life like that? Is that kind of faith, the conviction of reality, even though I can't see it, even though the circumstances around me reveal no evidence of that to which I am hoping for? Do I believe it anyway? Do I have faith anyway? Am I placing and believing is divinely guaranteed, as Hebrews 11:1 says? Am I living that kind of life? Are you living that kind of life? Well, let's take stock of that. That's my challenge for you this week. As you're asking yourself that question, I want you to sit down with the Lord. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, some of you, maybe it'll take 30 minutes. I don't know. But it's worth it. Because if we want to please God, we've got to live a life of faith. So let's take inventory in some specific areas in our life. We want to have faith in all areas of our life. So take inventory in your spiritual life, in your time with the Lord, in your relationship with Him. Are you moving forward? Is it just staying the same? What about your physical life? Just even our bodies, our temple. What about our financial life, in the way that we're stewarding the resources and the money that God gives us? Is faith being modeled in that? What about your relationships, your friendships, and your family? Your vocational life, in your work? Do you have faith? Is your faith being modeled in your work? What about just your ministry, your service in the church, out of the church? Take each one of those areas and ask this question. Here's another way to look at it. What am I pursuing? What am I praying for in each of these areas? How am I living that can only happen with God's power? And it's as you and I answer those questions, and we begin to put on paper and see what faith is looking like in each one of those areas of our lives, that you and I will begin to ultimately find out if we are pleasing God, because that is the goal, and that is your seed of faith for today.